Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, sorry, I was late, 2 minutes late. I'm going to be sharing the screen with you guys right now. Here we go. Start broadcasting. Okay, so we're gonna take it from we're gonna continue from where we left off. Last time, you guys remember what we were talking about? But first, let me find that. Okay, here we go. So, so last time we were talking about direction words and their meanings, right? So you should sort of have an idea of what it means to analyze something, correct? So let's just go through what we studied in the last class previously. Quickly. So analyze is to find a relationship, okay, between variables. It is quite rare for the examiners to ask you to analyze anything, but analyzing is a good habit by itself, right? Okay, so when you're given a question, it's always a good practice to try to identify the relationships between variables. Okay. Argue, on the other hand, argue is quite important, okay? And that is one of the most common questions that they ask you in IELTS examination, okay? So argue doesn't have to be a fight. Like most people would associate arguing with fighting, right? Um, Arguing in academic sense doesn't have to be a fight. It's basically a claim with just some explanation. Okay. For example, you can say that someone is smart or someone is stupid. Okay. But just because you say someone is smart doesn't mean I have to believe you. Okay. So you can say, for example, Sarah. Look, Sarah is just a figurative name. Okay. Sarah's a person. Sarah is smart. Okay. It's understandable, isn't it? But no one has to believe that Sarah is smart until you justify it, until you explain it. Okay, and depending on how well you can explain it. Okay, if you explain it in a persuasive way, then it is more likely that I will believe that Sarah is smart. But if you do not use any theory, any laws, any principle to back up your claim, then it is unlikely that I will be convinced to believe that Sarah is smart. Okay, I believe you guys remember an example that I gave you in the previous class. I mean, we can go through all that again, okay? Just in case some of you were not there or some of you might have forgotten, okay? So let me just go to my blackboard real quick. Here we go. Okay, so argument, right? Argument is nothing but a combination of claim, justification, right? And of course, conclusion, right? My favorite analogy is to compare argument with cooking. You guys know how to cook, right? So when you cook something, you need to prepare your ingredients. raw ingredients, of course, right? Raw ingredients could be some veggies, some meat, you know, some seasoning. So those are raw ingredients, basically proteins, right? All sorts of meat, and any kinds of meat, beef, pork, chicken, whatever. Okay. And justification is how would you do to apply heat to your raw ingredients? Now, there are multiple ways to, apply heat to raw ingredients, right? You can stir fry with some oil, you can boil, you can grill, you can bake, you can, do all sorts of things. Okay, so that is just an application of heat. Okay, applying heat to your to proteins or to your raw ingredients. Okay, so I'll just say applying heat. Okay. Right. And once you're applying heat, your raw ingredients becomes something you can eat. We call it food. Right. But if you sort of look at it as a process, I think it's make a little more sense for me to just change this plus signs into an arrow. So it looks more like a process, So cooking is like a process of applying heat to raw ingredients, right, to make it edible. Okay. So say you have an egg that's raw, isn't it? You can't eat it. It's eatable, of course, but it's raw. It contains some, bacteria, and it's not a good idea to eat it raw. Say you fry your eggs, okay? In the end, you're going to get a fry eggs, which is, nice and eatable. Okay, so argument is somewhat similar to this. So a claim can just be any statement, right, that is understandable, right? Example, like I just gave you, Sarah is smart. Okay, so Sarah is a person. My claim is that she's smart. Okay. The problem here is, who would believe me that Sarah is smart? Right? You probably don't even know who Sarah is and what has she done in her life, to be qualified for being smart. So there's a lot of questions that can be raised, when you make this kind of claim. So it's my job to justify it. Okay, so just like when you cook, right? A good cook isn't just someone who who own a frying pan and an electric stove. You need skill too, right? You need to know, for example, how much oil you would need to fry an eggs, all right, and how much time do you need to leave the oils in your frying pan for it to heat up. Okay, and then how much time do you think you need to to fry an eggs so that it's not overcooked. Okay, so there's a lot of thought that you have to put into it. Okay, the same is true with justifying your claim. So you need to be selective about principle or theory or law that you want to use to back up your claim. Okay. If you refer to a well-established theory, that's good. Okay. Because when a theory is well established, that means it has been proven, by researchers, by scientists. right? Okay, law of physics, for examples, are very well established because they've been around for many years, right? They have stood the test of time, right? So they're quite convincing if you use them to, justify your claim, okay? But sometimes you sometimes you might have to make a claim that is quite outside of your, area of interest. So you don't know what laws refer to, right? Okay. Um, so sometimes you might just have to, relies on your observation, on your definition. So I'm going to show you, different ways to, justify your claim. So first, I'm going to refer to a well-established um, theory. I think it's called IQ theory. I mean, you guys can look it up for more information. Okay, so basically, what IQ stands for intelligent quotient. First of all, right? So IQ, that stands for intelligent quotients. Okay, so when you there's many institute that decide their own IQ test. You know, one of the most renowned, IQ test, like reliable one, is the one decided by MIT. MIT, that's an acronym for Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Okay, that's one of the very most reliable IQ tests. So basically, they break your intelligence into different dimensions. Mathematical dimension, logic and reasoning dimension, linguistic dimension, and some other dimension. Sometimes they're four, sometimes they're eight, depending on the type of your IQ test. Okay, but in general, you'll be sitting a test. Okay, and then at the end of the test, your score will be calculated, right? Okay, and if your if your score lies anywhere below 100, then that means something wrong. Okay, okay, something wrong here means you are not, intelligent. Okay, but if your scores lies above 100, then you can go tell anyone that you are
ไม่ได้ยินเลยค่ะอาจารย์
Hi, I was not aware that you guys could not hear me. Um, was it from the beginning or my voice just got cut off like a few seconds ago? Do I have to start from the beginning or can anyone sort of give me any clue about when you couldn't hear me? Were you not able to hear me from the beginning or just a few seconds ago? All right. Oh, well, if a few seconds ago. Okay, right. Thanks, God. Thank you so much. I thought I had my mute on the whole time, so okay, good thing I don't have to start from the beginning. All right. Um, where was I? Okay. So a smart person is someone who's capable. Okay, just to, I'm not sure when. What happened here? Okay, I'm not sure. When my voice got cut off. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to um, the second technique to justify my claim. So as I show you, there are different ways to justify a claim. Right, one way is to use a well-established theory like IQ to convince someone to believe that you know uh, a person, in this case Sarah, is smart. Okay. The second method is to use your own definition, okay, to justify or to convince your audience that, in this case, the claim is true. Oh, Sarah is smart. Sarah is smart is my claim, okay? All right. And my definition for a smart person is right here. A smart person is someone who is capable of translating his or her knowledge into something useful. Okay, this is my definition, my very own definition. Okay, and since it's my definition, I don't think that it has enough weight to it. Not having enough weight to it means it's not credible. I mean, I'm no one, I'm not an expert, okay? And so people have no reasons to believe me. That's why I have to um, sort of reinforce my definition by referring to something that most people already believe, okay? Like Tesla, for example. Tesla is a well-renowned scientist, right? Very respectable, okay? The company Tesla was named after him, okay? I assume that you guys know Tesla. Um, Tesla was a brilliant, right? A brilliant man, okay? Who was able to invent, man, he invented so many things. Okay, but one of his remarkable invention, in my opinion, would be a transformer. Okay? Caesar was a brilliant man, and sometimes when you write, you sort of make a typo. Was a brilliant man who was able to invent a transformer. Okay, for long distance electrical transmission. Okay. And how did he learn to do all of this? Now, first of all, Tesla is this very smart guy, right? but he was also, um, I don't want to say a bastard, but Tesla, if you read his biography, right, he went to Graz Polytechnic School in Austria, and he never graduated from Graz Institute because he was addicted to gambling, right? And because of that, he 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 has to he had to leave school. I wasn't even sure he was kicked out. Okay, but you guys can look it up in your free time about Tesla early life, right, as a student. Okay, what I remember from what I read is that he went to a university, not even a university, it was a polytechnic school, right, in Austria. And of course, he was a straight A student, right? He did exceptionally well for subjects like mathematics and physics. But he somehow developed addiction to gambling, and that just stopped him from achieving his goal, right? So he just never graduated because of that habit. So Tesla was a brilliant mind who was able to invent a transformer for long distance electrical transmission, right? Despite his lack of formal education. I say formal because he didn't go to uni, okay? Despite his lack of formal education. So his education come from hands-on experiment. Because when he was invited to work for Edison, Edison back then, he owns and run General Electric, which is one of the most popular electrical company. Edison does so many things, from power station to light bulbs to all sorts of things. Yeah, it's amazing, another amazing inventor. Okay, so Tesla has his own lab. When he was invited to work for Edison, and he would spend hours after hours in that lab and building so many things. Yeah, some of his inventions were kept in a museum in his what you call in the town where he was born, which I think is in Smiljan, right? Smiljan. Where is Smiljan, by the way? And I used to know, but this thing just sometimes it can be forgotten. Smiljan, Croatia. Yeah, that's the country. A village of Croatia. That's Tesla birthplace. Beautiful, isn't it? Oh, there we go. Nikola Tesla. Come on, come back. Nikola Tesla Memorial Center. Yeah. Yeah. Smiljan. That's where the genius was born. And that is a town in Croatia. Okay, despite his lack of formal education. Okay, so basically this is an example of a smart person, right? It fits the definition, because my definition say a smart person is someone who can translate his knowledge into something useful. So Tesla translate his knowledge into, inventing a transformer, which is very useful. For those of you who don't know much about electricity, you can think of electricity as, when you order stuff from Amazon, sorry, stuff from Shopee or Lazada, right? Suppose the shop that you say you order a headphone, right? It's from China. Wait a minute, Lazada, that's in Thailand. Okay. Suppose you in Bangkok, right? And the shop where you order an item from is in south of Thailand. Now, if there's no motorized transport like car, say we have to rely on a horse, okay? How many days or weeks would it take for you to receive your headphone if your headphone has to be delivered to you through a horse ride, through someone riding a horse? It's gonna take a very long time, right? Okay. Electricity, it's kind of, it's something like that, but it's not about the time. It's about how far it can go. You know, yeah, maybe I give you not a very good analogy because for delivery, the limitation is time, isn't it? Okay, the limitation is time. It could be very long distance. Okay, the longer the distance, the longer the time. But in terms of electricity, the longer the distance, the more the loss, and the greater the investment. So back then there were, you know, in time of Edison's, which I think was in what 1952, right? Let me look it up again. I think one of the first power station in America was in New York, and it's called Pearl Street. Pearl Street Power Station. Let's see when it was built. And it says here that Pearl Street Power Station was built in 1882. That was even before the First World War. Wow. Amazing. I thought it was built in the 20th century. Wow. This is something new. I didn't know. I was aware of the power station, but I was not aware that it was built way before the First World War. Okay, so they've built this Pearl Street power stations, right? But the way electricity was made back then was through direct current, and direct current has a limitation in that it cannot be transmitted over a long distance because it cannot be stepped up. Okay, and when it cannot be stepped up, you have to transmit electricity at the exact same voltage as it is generated. Okay, say it is generated as 110 volt, then the transmission voltage is also going to be 110. Okay. Now, over long distance, there's going to be a lot of loss, and also, the current that will be transmitted to the transmission line will be very high, which means you're going to need big conductor, big wire. Okay, big wire, which is made of aluminum. And the bigger the wire, the greater the structure to support it. And all this gonna cost a lot of money. So electricity back then was a privilege only for the rich, right? It's because it can't transmit electricity too far from where it is generated, right? So only rich people who live around power station will have access to electricity. And back then, electricity was used only for a few purposes, like to energize your lighting, your lights, basically. It wasn't really used to power your electronic devices like computer or anything like that. Okay, so Tesla came along with this idea of generating power in AC instead of DC, which can then be stepped up, right, to hundreds of thousands of volt. Okay, and so when the voltage is high, the current doesn't have to be high, to transmit the same power. So basically, with Tesla design, they were able to transmit electricity over a much, much longer distance at much lower cost. So he became the hero. Right. So Tesla was a brilliant man who was able to invent a transformer for long distance transmission despite his lack of formal education. I would probably want to put something before this, because this is my example. A good example of a person who fits this definition is Nikola Tesla. Was able to invent a transformer Are you guys still there? The transformer for long distance transmission. Okay, so I'm going to say this enable people to have access to electricity regardless of where they are or regardless of where they are or their wealth. Okay, sort of, making people more equal. Okay, now I have, with this example, my definition is reinforced, right? It's more like plausible, it's more convincing. Okay, which is at the time for me to relate the subject of my claim to my definition. Okay. Sarah. Sarah is not a great scientist like Tesla. But she does something. She does something similar. She learns, she spends hours on YouTube every day to learn mathematics. Okay. And offer to teach young people live in her neighborhood for free charge. Okay. So Sarah sort of fit my definition, right? My definition say learn something and apply your knowledge into something useful, then you are smart. So Sarah just learned some math from YouTube videos, okay, and with the knowledge that she has accumulated, right, she used it to teach young people who live in her neighborhood without charging them any money. So that's how you benefit society with something that you've learned. So that's fit my definition. So I can now go and say that Sarah is smart. Okay. So in terms of sentence structure, you probably see that there's no difference between the sentence on the left and sentence on the right. Okay, they look the same. Sarah is, sorry, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with my highlighter? Okay, you probably don't see any different because they sound the same. After all, they're the exact same sentence. Okay, but in terms of credibility, the sentence on the left is not as credible as the sentence on the right, because the sentence on the right has already been justified. Okay, so it's something like this egg. Right, this egg is edible, but it cannot be eaten just yet because it's not cooked. But this egg on the right hand side, right, is going to have more value than this egg on the left, because someone has spent that time, you know, cooking it, right? So the value of fried eggs is going to be higher than the raw eggs. Okay, the same is true for my conclusion on the right hand side. Okay. Now let's go back to the table. Okay, so you guys know about arguing. Okay. Next up is assess. Now, assess is the same as evaluate. Okay, when you assess something, you need to know on what aspects you have to consider. For example, if you have to assess or evaluate a solution, right? A solution. I'll just delete this one, okay? If you have to assess a solution or evaluate a solution, in the end, you have to be able to draw a conclusion whether this is a good solution or not. But before you can draw that kind of conclusion, you will have to look at, different aspects. First could be the efficiency of a solution, right? Actually, before you think about efficiency, you might first want to think about effectiveness. If a solution is effective, then it does exactly what you expect it to do, right? Efficiency is about how much it costs you, how much time you have to spend, how much money you have to invest. And third would be practicality or viability. Is it going to really work? Yeah. Okay. Fourth is the pros and cons. Okay. If you guys remember this news headlines, probably a few years back, right? The 13 soccer players who were trapped in a cave in northern Thailand, right? So they were venturing into that cave and they weren't aware of the heavy rainfall, right? So after it rains, that cave was flooded. The water level was rising, and those kids, 13 of them, they were not able to get out of the cave from where they came in. So they were trapped in that cave. And they need a rescue team to get them out. Now, back then, a lot of people, engineers, mechanics, everyone, they put the head together about what would be the best solution to rescue, the kids. And I think Elon Musk, he came up with this idea of inflatable tunnel. So Elon Musk was going to, if I were to draw it, okay, so this is like, this is where the kids are, right? They were on the elevated plane inside the cave. Okay, that's the cave. Something like that, okay? And it's flooded with water. Okay, so they were just, oops. They were here. Okay. And everywhere else is flooded with water. Okay. So Elon Musk had an idea of using an inflatable tube. So here's an inflatable tube. And he planned to get someone to bring that tube all the way to where the kids are. So this yellow line here is just a tube, right? So some scuba diver will have to bring the tube from the entrance. So here's the entrance, okay? All the way to where the kids are. And once they've reached, where those kids are, then they will inflate this tube. Okay, they will inflate this. This will be air inside this tube, and air would chill water from getting in. Okay, and then they can, all these kids can just walk into this air tunnel, right, to outside of the cave. That's the inflatable tubes idea. So theoretically, that is possible, but it's not easy to implement. It's going to take a lot of time. Okay, and even though they managed to insert that tube, inflatable tube in the tunnel, it by the time they finish it, those kids might have died of starvation or air suffocation or something else. Okay, it takes too much time to do it, so it's not viable. It's possible, but it takes so much effort. It's not viable. Okay, so that's viability. Is how realistic it is to implement a certain solution. Now, when you want to solve certain problem, you sort of have to think about people's belief in that area. Whether your solution is going to comes into conflict with what they believe, right? Okay, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. So some things might work, but if it is, against the cultural belief of people in that particular society, then that ideas might have to be dropped. Okay, so what about effectiveness and efficiency? Effectiveness is about whether your solution will deliver the result that you expect. And you can think about, for example, transportation, right? So if you live in Bangkok and you want to go from one place to another, okay, in Bangkok, there's various mode of transport, right? We have Uber, taxi. We can walk as well. We can hire a motorcycle taxi. We could ride a bus. We can ride a BTS, right? So all these modes of transport are effective because we can rely on anything to move us from one place to another. But in terms of efficiency, all these modes of transport are different. Now you might think that walking might be the most efficient, but while walking doesn't cost you anything, it doesn't cost you any money, but it takes a very long time, right? Okay, so if time is considered a resource, then walking is a very wasteful method because it's wastes so much time, right? Taxi, well, it is effective, but it's expensive. It costs you money. And if you're stuck in the traffic on Friday night, then it is even worse than walking, isn't it? Okay, so what would be a more efficient mode of transport? Elevated railway like the BTS would be a more efficient mode of transport, right? Because it doesn't take too much time, compared to taxi or walking. right? And the fare is affordable. So BTS, or the elevated railway, is a more efficient, mode of transport. Okay, so when you evaluate a solution, you have to look at, all of this area: effectiveness, efficiency, viability, pros and cons. Now, when you compare a solution, which is better? So you sort of, compare those solutions in terms of effectiveness, efficiency, viability, pros and cons. Okay. All right. Classifying. I think classify is all about grouping, you know. You probably won't be asked to classify that much, right? But classifying is probably what you do to improve your writing coherence. Because when you group things, when you put things into category, it sort of make it easier for your reader to follow. Okay. Compare and contrast. Now that's pretty common. Compares mean to find similarities, and contrast mean to find differences. Right. When you do assignment, you might be asked to compare, two travel destination. Okay. Now, the question might ask you to compare, but do you also want to look for differences as well? Okay. So you can look at, different, aspects where, two destinations have in common. Okay. And you also have to look for aspects where these two destinations are different. Example, if somebody asks you to compare Bangkok and Singapore, okay, now how would you go about writing an answer for this? Okay, so you probably want to look at, all different aspects. You can start off with one or two, okay, and then explore a little further. So if you look at these two travel destinations in terms of geographic location, they're similar, aren't they? Because they are both located in Southeast Asia. Okay, they may differ in terms of latitude, but that is not really a big deal because after all, they in the same geographical location. They have they are in the same climate zone, which is tropical zone, which is characterized by hot, the weather being hot and humid. Okay, so in terms of geographic location, they're quite similar, right? But in terms of facilities, you could see a difference. Well, I don't know about today, but I remember 5 years ago when I visited Singapore, everything is well connected. All right, you can just use one card and you can have access to all kinds of transportation. It's very convenient. Okay. And it's not really far, to find, a metro station, from wherever you live. And the city is very well organized, as the sidewalk, for example, is wide enough. Okay. And they don't allow street food vendors, which on the one hand, it makes the city looks neat, right? But of course, on the other hand, if you go hungry, in the middle of the night, then there's no place for you to conveniently buy your food. Unlike Bangkok, where street food vendors are everywhere, all you have to do is get out of your motel, and whenever you turn left or right, you will find at least one street food vendors. Okay. So that's sort of how you compare and contrast. Okay. Define is to give the meaning of a subject. Define is the same as giving a definition. Okay. To give a definition, if you remember from English 2, we talk a little bit about the use of relative clause. Now that is one technique that allows you to give definition to anything. So for example, if I ask you, what is an even number? Okay, so basically I'm asking you to define an even number. Now, of course, you can say some things like even numbers are numbers like 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12. You can say it like that, but this is not a very good definition, is it? A good definition would look something like this. An even number. An even number is a number. Okay, so this here is a common noun. Okay, so when you define, you need to know what set or what category you want to put your subject into. Like, what's apple? Apple is a fruit, so fruit is a common noun, right? And apple is just an element or a member in this group, right? So even number is a number. And then you use a relative clause to add more information to it. So what makes even number different from other numbers, say odd number? So an even number is a number that is evenly divisible by 2. An even number is a number that is evenly divisible by 2, which means when you divide an even number by 2, there is no remainders. So that is how you write a definition, right? So you need a common noun, basically a set, okay? And you need a restrictive relative clause. Okay. Next is describe, okay? There is no hard and fast rules about how you would describe something, okay? So if you're asked to describe anything, basically you want to give as much details as possible, okay? And you want to rely a lot on words like adjective when you describe something. So structure like subject plus be plus adjective is going to be very common when it's come to describing something. Okay. There's not much to talk about describe really. Discuss. Okay, so discuss is quite common. Okay, in IELTS examination, there's a lot of questions that ask you to discuss advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so basically discuss means to find and to explain. For example, if the question asks you to discuss advantages and disadvantages of a of studying abroad, for example, then you have to identify benefits, right? Advantages mean benefits, right? You have to find benefits, and you have to find the drawbacks. Okay, and you have to explain each one of them. For example, if one benefit of studying abroad is to perhaps improve your English, okay, then you have to go into detail about how studying abroad can help you to improve your English. Okay, so you can talk about how the environment in a different country will force you to use English, or to make you feel that less shy, of feeling less awkward when you have to speak the language. Okay, right. Evaluate, we talked about that already. Explain. Okay, explain is you probably won't get a question that directly asks you to explain something, but explaining is already part of everything, particularly for argument. Okay, so what does explain really means? Okay, so one very important part of explanation is example, right? A good example will make things much easier to understand. Okay, so when you explain something, you need to have good example, and also you need to be able to identify the logic behind. Okay, I'm going to use this example. Okay, I probably used it before, but I'm going to do it again. Okay, so if you ask me, okay, Nat, please explain to me why we should not leave a cold glass of water outside on a wooden table. Okay, yeah, why should you not leave a glass of water? Okay, here's a wooden table, and here is a glass of water. Okay, it's a wooden table. Okay, so this is cold, right? It has some ice. Why should you not put a glass of cold water on a wooden table? Say at higher temperatures. Okay, so one explanation would be, oh, because if you leave this, glass of cold water on the wooden table, it's going to create a water puddle around it at the bottom, and that water can damage the wooden table. Now that's one way to explain it, right? But a good explanation would prevent any further questions. You see, if someone explains something so well, then you won't have any more questions to ask. Okay, so a good explanation to be able to be able to create a good explanation, you sort of have to assume the role of a student, right? If you don't understand something, you have to ask yourself why you don't understand, okay? And what are the questions that needs to be answered for you to understand that thing? For example, when I say, hey, don't put this, cold glass of water outside on a wooden table because it's going to create puddles and damage the table, then you might ask, why does this happen? Why is how is this puddle of water formed in the first place? Right. Okay. So because this question is not answered, right? It's not clearly answered, then my explanation is not complete, or at least it's not good enough. Right? I might be able to stop you from putting this glass of water on my wooden table outside, but I fail to make you understand why that happens. Okay. Now, if I were to redo it again, okay, and this time I'm going to refer to some sort of law, okay. So I'm going to say that um, water, or you know, fluid, okay. Water is a kind of fluid, right? And water has different phases, doesn't it? It has a solid phase, it has the liquid phase, and it also has the gas phase. How does water change phase? Heat. Like when ice, for example, which is a solid form of water, absorb heat, it turns into liquid. Okay? And if continue to absorb heat further, it turns into gas or vapor. Okay, so water absorb energy, it changes its phase. So how does water go from gas or vapor into liquid? It has to lose energy. Okay, so when vapor in the air lose energy, it becomes liquid water. And when liquid water lose energy further, it turns to ice. Okay, now the process of water losing temperature is known as condensation. Okay, so like when the temperatures in the atmosphere, right, in the sky, is very low, the water vapor becomes to lose energy. In other words, they condensate, they turn into droplets and fall off the sky as rains. Okay, right. And if it was raining, maybe in Antarctica, the temperatures continue to drop. And as the temperatures continue to drop, those droplets of water that probably form a lake or a pond or whatever will just turn into ice. So that's the theory. That's the laws. Actually, that's how water cycles work. That's how water changes its phase. Gaining, losing energy, that sort of thing. So what does it have to do with this? Glass of cold water sitting on the wooden table on a hot day. So what happened is, so there's our air, consists of vapor, right? So there's going to be vapor surrounding this glass of cold water, even though you can't see it with your naked eyes. The vapor is surrounding this, cold glass of water. Okay, and because this glass of water has ice in it, it's very cold. So when vapor in the air comes into contact with the ice, what happens is lose energy. condensate. Okay, so when it loses energy, it turns into droplets, and the droplets is going to be sticking onto the outer surface of the glass. Okay, and because of the gravity, the droplets get pulled down into the bottom of the glass, and they form a small puddle. And that puddle, over time, can damage your wooden table, causing it to swell. Right, okay. So you see, I'm going super deep now into details, but that sort of, answer any question that you may have, okay? So a good explanation is an explanation that is well executed. It answers all the questions that a listener or reader may have. Okay, next is identify. Okay, identifying is, is to is finding. Okay, but what does identify really means? Okay, if I ask you to identify, say, if I ask you to identify countries that are in, if I were to ask you to identify Asian countries, okay, what will be your answer? So you're gonna come up with names like India. India, is it Asian? Well, it's kind of, right? Make it Southeast Asian, okay? Southeast Asian country, right? Identify Southeast Asian country. You would come up with names like Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, the Philippines, Singapore. Why? Because you have been told that these are Southeast Asian countries, right? Okay. But if I ask you to identify prime numbers, right, from 1 to 10, give me prime numbers, what are you going to do, right? You can't just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because you need to know the rules of how prime numbers are determined. Okay, so prime number is just a number that is only divisible by 1 and itself. So prime number between 1 and 10 is 2, 3, 5, 7. These are the prime numbers. Okay, so in order to identify anything, you need to know a set of rules that you use. Okay. So basically, identifying is being able to tell the differences between one thing from another. Moving on to illustrate. To illustrate is to provide example of the subject. Okay. So to illustrate something is just another way of asking for an example. Please illustrate means please give an example. Okay. I'm not going to worry too much about indicate or relate, but let's talk about summarizing. Okay, so summarizing is all about repeating, this. Okay, well, first of all, in what situation do you have to summarize? It is quite common for you to write a summary paragraph, right? Once you have written an assignment or once you have written an essay. Now, there's this one situation where you have to write a summary. Now, in this particular case, writing a summary is nothing other than repeating what you have already written before. Okay, but if we have to repeat everything that we have written before, doesn't that mean writing the essays 2 times? No, you don't have to write everything twice, okay? What I mean by repeating is just the key points, the important points, okay? So for example, if I say the use of renewable energy will reduce carbon emissions and will also save your power bill. Okay. Now, you're probably going to hear this sort of sentence in a body paragraph where each point needs to be elaborated. So when I say the use of renewable energy will reduce carbon emissions, I have to explain how. So I have to say some things like the use of renewable energy does not require any burning of any fossil fuel. And because there's no burning, there is not going to be any emission of gases like carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, and so on. And all of these gases are considered harmful for our atmosphere. The greenhouse gases, so they can, block the heat from radiating into the outer space. So that's explanation, right? How does renewable energy save your power bill? If we all have if solar roofs are so cheap that the upfront cost is not so high, and everyone can build can have solar rooftop and perhaps another wind turbine just to integrate with the solar roof, then we all don't have to buy electricity from the power company, right? And there's no transmission cost because the electricity is used where it's produced. So electricity will be cheap. Okay. All right. So that's explanation. But when you write a summary, you don't need the explanation part. You just need to repeat the key points. Okay. So basically, if I'm going to write a conclusion for what I have said earlier, I would just say, in summary, renewable energy is more advantageous than the non-renewable counterparts because it's good for the environment and it's also good for the economy. So that's what I would say, in summary. Okay, so summary is all about repeating the same thing. Now, some of us might be thinking that, hey, can I just add something, some other key points that I probably have not yet mentioned? Like, say, when you're writing a paragraph about renewable energy, right? And say in the body section, you've talked about two benefits, like saving power bill and being responsible for the environment. But when it comes to your final paragraph, say your summary, you come up with another idea, another benefit of renewable energy. And that's perhaps renewable energy is, what should it be? So it's save your money, it's good for the environment, and it might boost tourism. Okay, how does that sound? Renewable energy can boost tourism. Sounds good, isn't it? But do you think you should add it in conclusion when you write a summary? No. Why? Because you're not explaining it. When you write a summary, all the points that you include in the summary must have already been explained earlier. Now, renewable, there's a lot of, renewable power stations that become tourist attraction. In New Zealand, for example, there's this wind farm. It's called West Wind, and that's located in Wellington. Wellington is the capital of New Zealand. It's in the southern part of the Northern Island, and it's one of the most visited attraction. It's so beautiful. I haven't been there myself. I've been to Wellington once when I had to uh, um, renew my passport because the one that I have been carrying for 5 years just expired early this year. So I had to go all the way to the Thailand embassy, which is in Wellington, to renew my passport. Right. And everyone told me to just go and visit that wind farm. They say it's fantastic. I would love it. But my schedule was very tight, and unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to visit it. But it's I regret it. But so at some point, probably this year before I go back home, I will take the second trip down to Wellington just to see that farm and probably take some pictures. So anyway, don't include points that you have not mentioned when you summarize something. Okay. Oh my God. The time is now 8:32, and in Thailand, that's 3:30, right? So we've been together for 1.5 hours. How about we take a short break? Okay, say 10 minutes break. And next we'll talk about brainstorming. Okay, I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. โอเคครับมาต่อ so where were we okay so next we're going to be looking at brainstorming technique okay on page what page is this there's no page number okay so brainstorming technique everyone okay so first of all there are different techniques for brainstorming the free writing there's listing okay and there's what else 5ws and mind mapping okay so let's talk about brainstorming in general first of all before we go into details about techniques so brainstorming is about generating ideas okay generating ideas and ideas will be turned into content which you use to write your essay okay so each one of this will help you to generate ideas but they may not all be they may not always be suitable for every situation okay but I think I want to prioritize listing I think listing will suit you guys in most cases be it examination or assignments okay but we talk about every techniques anyway so let's start with free writing so free writing relies on the fact that time pressure will cause you to release adrenaline hormone and adrenaline will help you to think faster okay it's based on this concept okay um let's say you have to write say I give you an assignment topic okay please write about globalization okay you might have learned about globalization at some point in your life but you don't remember much about it okay so how do we squeeze out stuff that we have learned okay but might have already forgotten and one way to do it is to use time pressure so to do free writing you need to know a topic you want to write about and then you want to time yourself okay now how long you want to time yourself well it shouldn't be too long right because if it's too long then there's no pressure maybe 5 minutes 5 minutes is a good time to put pressure on you so in 5 minutes you are to write anything that comes to your mind with regards to globalization okay when you do it when you do free writing you don't check your idea just write anything that enters your mind just write it your goal is maybe to complete an A4 page okay in 5 minutes write as much as you can okay so once this is done you will come back and read through all your lines and try to extract ideas that can be further developed okay so it's kind of like when you go fishing and you use a net right when you use a net and you throw that into the water you don't know what's your net's gonna catch you're targeting certain fish but you might end up catching crabs and prawns and some other shells and then you have to sift through everything that you've caught looking for your fish something like that okay so free writing is all about using time pressure to help you to squeeze out your ideas it's amazing sometimes you know with time pressure with adrenaline rush, you might realize that you've learned about something that a long time ago, and you don't even remember that you have, right? So that's kind of cool. But the problem with free writing is it's disorganized. Okay, so after 5 minutes, you still need another maybe 5 minutes to extract and organize your ideas. So it's not very efficient, especially when time is of essence, like for examination. This is why we have listing. Okay, so listing. How does listing work? So listing works in conjunction with WS, the 5WS. Sorry, WH, not S. WH is what, where, when, why, and how. Okay, it works in conjunction, it works together. Okay, so when you combine listing and 5WH question, you have a very powerful brainstorming technique. Okay, and you can basically use this technique for all kinds of questions. Okay, so I'm gonna just give you an example of a questions that you can use this brainstorming technique to generate ideas. Okay, I'm gonna have to pause my screen for a second because I have to go into my camera roll to look for this question. Okay, stop sharing. All right. Sorry for the wait. Back to screen sharing. Okay, so here we go. A question. Let me just, how do I crop this thing? Well, doesn't matter. Okay, well, let's read this. In a recent survey conducted in this country, it was found that up to 20% of 12 years old in some schools were showing early signs of nicotine addiction. In the 18 to 20 year age bracket, the percentage was as high as 70%. A large contributing factor to this high level of addiction is attributed to the uncensored television advertising of cigarettes. For this reason, all cigarette advertising should be banned. Do you agree or disagree? Okay, so why don't I just give you guys a few minutes to think about this. Think about how you will answer this question, how you would write an essay, okay, to answer this question. Right. I just like you to try. Okay. I will give you 3 minutes. Okay. And then I'll show you how to generate idea using listing and fire WS. 3 minutes. Okay. That's not even 3 minutes, is it? Just don't want to bore you guys. Okay, so to go about answering this question, it is best for us to truly understand what is given to us. Okay. Now, when you look at the question, it's look kind of simple, right? It asks, do you agree or disagree? But agree or disagree with what? With the entire thing? No, not really. When somebody asks whether you agree or disagree, you have to identify the actual claim in the statement. Not everything that is given to you is a claim, right? Okay. The claim is the conclusion. So you have to sort of analyze the statement first so that you can identify the conclusion. And that conclusion is your claim. Okay, so you are actually responding to the conclusion in that statement, not the entire statement. Okay, so let's analyze to see what has been given to you. Okay, analyze the statement. Okay, so when we read the first line, it says, in a recent survey conducted in this country, it was found that up to 20% of 12 years old in some schools were showing an early signs of nicotine addiction. If I were to rephrase it to make it, less, formal, less academic, this is nothing but a lot of young people are now addicted to cigarettes, right? Young people. Okay. And the next sentence, it says in the 18 to 20 year age bracket, the percentage was as high as 70. This could be rephrased as the older young people get, the more they become smokers. Right? This whole sentence here, this whole sentence can be simplified to as young people grow older, more of them smoke. Right? As young people grow older, more of them smoke. The older they get, the more they smoke. So you will find high percentage of smokers in the 17 to 20 year age bracket, right? So percentage is what, 70%. So out of 100 students who are between 17 and 20, 70 of them smoke. But if you look at the younger age group, like 12 years old, out of 100, only 20 smoke. Okay, so this two sentences tells you nothing but an existing issue about nicotine addiction among young people, right? Okay, so what's next? It say a large contributing factor to this high level of addiction is attributed to uncensored television advertising of cigarettes. Now, this words right here, be attributed to, what does it mean? It's the same as result from or come from. That's what it means. Okay? So, large contributor to this addiction. So basically, this refers back to the previous sentence. Okay? So it said that this addiction comes from what? Come from uncensored TV advertising of cigarettes. So the questions try to show you that there is a link between uncensored TV advertising of cigarettes and the high level of cigarette addiction. It's trying to establish this link. Okay? So if you could remember, when we talk about direction words, analyze means to be able to consider how the parts interact and how they work together to form the whole. Okay, we can now see that uncensored advertising of cigarette, right? It causes, right? It causes what? It causes high level of cigarette addiction. Okay, but just to make this look a little more simple, I'm gonna instead of using a word, I'm gonna be drawing an arrow instead. Okay, so it's like easier to understand. So the tip of the arrow is pointing to high level of cigarette addiction, and the tail of the arrow is uncensored advertising of cigarette. So apparently, we are looking at what? Reason and result, or cause and effect, right? Cause and effect. And this effect is negative. And we can call that a problem. So far we see cause of a problem. Okay. So the entire, the first two sentences give you nothing but problem. Let me just highlight it for you. Yeah. is to you nothing but a problem. And the following sentence just give you the cause. Okay, now if you continue to read, it says, for this reason, all cigarette advertising should be banned. Now we notice a modal verbs being used here. And we also notice a transitional word for this reason. Whenever you see for this reason or synonym of the word like therefore, as a result, it just sort of tells you that a conclusion is going to be drawn here. Okay, so whatever that comes after words like this, for this reason, therefore, as a result, is going to be a conclusion. So that means all cigarette advertising should be banned is the conclusion of the entire statement. Right, it is the conclusion. So when they ask if you agree, they ask whether you agree with the last sentence here, with this conclusion. Okay, so I'm just going to complete my diagram here. So at first we found the cause of the problem, and later on we found a solution. And that solution says that all cigarettes advertising should be banned. That's the solution. Okay. So that last sentence here is nothing but a conclusion. That's it. Okay, so unsincere advertising cigarette is the cause of high level of addiction, and cigarette advertising is a solution. Whenever you decide on a solution, you must have some kind of expectation, don't you? Whenever you do something, when you spend money on anything, right? Okay, say you spend money on a toothbrush. Your toothbrush is a solution. So what do you expect out of a toothbrush? Is to give you a good oral health, right? When you spend money on a movie ticket, you must expect something. You must expect that the movie will entertain you, will make you happy, will increase the level of your endorphin, make you feel happy. You must have an expectation for everything you decide to do, for every product you purchase, all right? So for this, what do you think should be the expectation for this? All cigarette advertising should be banned. So the expectation should be just the opposite of the problem. What's the problem? The problem is problem is there's a high level of cigarette addiction, right? So after this solution, we expect lower level of cigarette addiction. Okay? We want fewer young people to be addicted to cigarette. Ideally, we don't want any young people to become addicted to cigarette, but realistically, that's not possible, isn't it? So we just want to reduce that percentage, reducing the number of young smokers. So that is an expectation. Okay. So we've analyzed the statement. Next, we're going to brainstorm. Now, to list, okay, you have to know area in which you want to generate ideas. Okay. Now, if you're going to answer this question, right, it looks like you have only two options, agree or disagree. Well, let's imagine this. If you agree with this statement, how would you try to explain yourself, right? If you agree that the banning of cigarette advertising will reduce the number of young smokers, how would you explain yourself, right? Okay. And if you can explain it, how would you break it down into different sections? You think you can do that? Or if you disagree with this statement, how would you go about it? Say, okay, I don't think a banning of cigarette advertising will work. What will be your next thing to say? Now, if you have any idea, that's cool. But if you don't, let me show you a systematic way to generate your ideas, okay? So like I said, if you're going to do listing, you need to, put your ideas in different sections. So let's start with what? Agree, shall we? Okay. If you agree with the statement, that means you support it, right? You support it. Okay. So if you're going to support the statement, there are a couple of questions that you should be able to answer. The first question is, how does advertising of cigarettes leads to high level of nicotine addiction? Okay. If you're going to agree with the statement, then that is one of the first questions you have to be able to answer. Okay. So let me write this down. So to support it, this is the first question you have to answer. What is the relationship? Or maybe I'll just rephrase it to how could uncensored advertising of cigarettes cause high level of cigarette addiction? Okay. So that's one of the first questions you should be able to answer. Why do we have to answer this question? Why? It is because the solution that is given to you right here, that solution is based on this perceived cost. Someone literally believes that advertising can cause addiction, right? And that leads them into thinking that banning advertising will stop the addiction. So if you're on their side, then you must be able to justify the first claim that advertising of cigarette really has something to do with high level of nicotine addiction. I'm going to leave the answer to this question for now, right? I'm just going to give you another question that you must be able to answer if you want to support their position here, if you want to be on their side. Okay. So the next question is, how can um, how can I'm just going to paraphrase this a little bit, okay? How can the level of cigarette addiction among young people can be reduced by banning cigarette advertising? Okay, how can the level of cigarette addiction among young people be reduced by banning cigarette advertising? Okay, so that's the second question you should be able to answer. If you can't answer all these questions, then you have good reasons to, take side with the person who think that banning cigarette advertising can address the issue of nicotine addiction. Okay, right. But are there any other things that can add more weight to your argument? Yeah, of course. Um, if you can think of other benefits, right, that are associated with the banning of advertising of cigarette, even though they have nothing to do with reducing the addiction level, it can still be um, it can still be there. Think about recycling, for example. Why do people recycle? They recycle. The primary objective is probably to reduce the amount of waste that have to go through the method of incineration or landfill, right? Because this waste management method can be harmful to the environment. Incineration is to burn, right? To burn all the rubbish, the garbage, the trash that you throw away. If you burn them, yes, they disappear. Into what? Into gases and into carbons, okay? And all of them are still bad for the environment. If you fill up a piece of land with waste, household waste, electronic waste, you just take up more and more space of land instead of using the land for something, more recreational, more beneficial. It's just there to be covered in garbage. Okay? So if we can recycle, we can just save the environment, and we can reduce the amount of landfill. So the waste go back to production line again. So in fact, there's no waste, because if you can recycle something, that is not a waste anymore. Because it will go back into the production line and will, become a new product again. So nothing goes to waste. But what do you think would be an inherent benefit of recycling? Yes, of course, it will improve the environment. But if you look at it from the perspective of the producer, they can save money, right? They can save money, can't they? Because they don't have to order raw material from the suppliers. They can just, use products that they have already sold again. A laptop computer, for example, when you throw away your laptop computer for whatever reasons, there are parts that are still healthy in your laptop. Maybe the motherboard is perfectly fine. It's probably just the battery that goes bad. Okay, or maybe it's just the cracked screen, right? Or maybe it's just the hard drive that stopped working. So they can just replace all those parts with the healthy ones, clean it up, and put it back into their shelf for sale. So that's called refurbished products. So basically, all the broken goods get repaired, have their bad part replaced, and it will look as good as new and go back to the market again. Okay, so from that perspective, recycling also benefit producers or the business. Okay, so that's and is an example of inherent benefits. Now, if you ban advertising of cigarette, I'll be back to our question here, okay? If we ban advertising of cigarette, let's just stop people from seeing cigarettes on the social media or on the televisions, right? What other benefit would it bring? That's something you have to think about. All right, but here's the question. What are the inherent benefits of banning advertising of cigarettes? Okay, so that's support. Next is the objection. Objection is when you disagree with something. So support means agree. Objection, disagree. Right. So if you disagree with the idea of banning cigarette advertising to stop young people from smoking, what would be the first question that you should answer? Well, if you look at what you have analyzed, you will see that the solution is based on the idea that cigarette advertising causes the addiction. So if you don't think that the banning of cigarette advertising would work, then that should mean that you don't think that cigarette advertising is the cause of the addiction to nicotine, right? Which begs the questions: why, right? Why cigarette advertising? Why cigarette advertising? In fact, I should put an auxiliary before that. Why is cigarette advertising why is cigarette advertising not the cause of nicotine addiction? Right. So that's probably one of the first questions that you should be able to answer if you disagree. All right. Okay. Now, what do you think should be the next questions to answer if you are the opposite side from those who want to ban cigarette advertising to reduce their level of addiction? The next question would be, okay, well, if advertising is not the cause, but that's still addiction, then what are the actual causes, right? What are the actual causes or the more powerful causes of nicotine addiction? Among young people. Right. Okay. So the next question, okay, say that you have come up with some ideas about causes of nicotine addiction, okay, and the more ideas you can come up with, the less effective the proposed solution is going to be, right? What's the proposed solution again? All cigarette advertising should be banned. That's the proposed solution. But if you can come up with, say, 8 other causes, right, or 8 other reasons why young people become smokers, then it's going to make the banning of advertising less and less and less effective. Right. Okay. So the next question should be, why is the proposed solution not a good idea? So in this case here, you have to do some evaluations. You guys remember what evaluation means? Evaluation or assess, okay, is to determine how good something is. In this case here, is how good is this solution, okay? So to evaluate solution, you have to look in terms of what? Evaluate. In terms of effectiveness, that's definitely one thing. If it's not effective, then what's the point, right? In terms of effectiveness, and then efficiency. Viability. Pros and cons. Okay. So these are the areas you want to look into. Okay. So what should be the next question? Okay, so you have introduced what you believe to be the actual causes of nicotine addiction. And you have said that, and you have explained why banning advertising isn't going to work. The next question to ask would be, then what are the better solutions? because the problem is still there. We have denied that the given cost. We're saying that advertising is not really the reason why young people develop addiction. We have argued that banning advertising is not going to be effective, but the problem is still not yet resolved. It has to be resolved by some other measures, by some other means. So the next question is, what are the better solutions? Right? What can be done to prevent young people from developing the addiction? Okay. So these are the main questions that you have to answer. So if you look at this, right, generating ideas is about asking questions, and you need WH questions WH is the pronouns, right? What, where, when, why, those are pronouns, and you need all these pronouns to form questions. And the more questions you can answer, the better your explanation will be, right? And the better your explanation is, the more convincing your argument will be. Okay, so I'm not going to answer all these questions just yet. I think I'll do it with you some other times, okay? But for today, I just want to show you how we list the ideas by using the WH questions. All right. So these are the main questions that you have to answer. But before you can before you start writing your argument, right, you sort of need to attract attention from your readers. I understand that, hey, answering the question is important. The question asks whether you agree or disagree, and all you have to do is give them your answer. But as a writer, when you communicate with the entire world, right? You don't just communicate to the very person who asked the question. You communicate with anyone, because anyone can come across your piece of writing. So you upload this on the internet, right? On your blog. Millions of people might come across your blog and read your essay. Now, if you really want them to read the entire essay, it's all about the very first paragraph. It's about the first sentence, right? If the first sentence is captivating, then chances are that they're going to read through your paragraph. But if the first sentence is not that captivating, then they were just going to dismiss it. Okay? So a good writer would want to try to create awareness, right? And that is a special section for brainstorming. Creating the awareness, making this important. Why should people care? In other words, why should people care about this issue? Why should people care about young people addiction to cigarette? This is a section where you have to generate some ideas. So how are you going to create awareness? How do you how should we make this problem important? Well, we can ask some questions like, what will be some of the main or major, some of the major negative consequences? What would be some of the major negative consequences of nicotine addiction. Okay? What would be some of the major negative consequences of nicotine addiction? There would be no point to try to stop this problem if it's not going to create other problems, or if it's not going to create some other more worrying issues, right? Okay. So what we have to do here is to think about what could be other problems that stem from nicotine addiction. Okay? So that we can say, if nicotine addiction is not resolved, it will lead to this issue. You know, like global warming, for example. Global warming has been around for ages, right? This term was coined before you guys were born. It was coined in the 20th century, right? So 20th century is between 1901 to 2000s. Global warming was coined probably during the same time as Industrial Revolution, which took place in England, because that's when humans turned to machine for mass production instead of using physical labor, because machine can do work at higher efficiency rate than human. But the downside of using machine is the emissions of carbon dioxide, right? And now they're harmful gases. So we have been producing more and more carbon emissions with our machine following the Industrial Revolution. And the rate of factory that have been built around the world is astonishing. There's so many factories, particularly in China, right? So as production becomes more cost effective, more damage has been done to the environment. But nobody cares about global warming until we see what happened recently, right? In our country, for example. During summer, the temperatures reach, in some part of Thailand, it was as high as 42 degrees Celsius. And this is by far the highest temperature that I have seen through my entire life. I'm 37, and the temperatures has never reached this high. Normally during summer, 35 is hot enough, right? But it has never gone anywhere close to 42. People start dying. You know, weird things happen. You know. Now, if you could go back in time, okay, and if you could raise higher awareness of global warming, if we knew that this would be the result of global warming, then we should have been able to create the awareness. We should have been able to heighten the awareness of many people. And probably renewable energy would have become more, more tremendously popular back then, because people would have feared the consequences of global warming. But back then, nobody knew what was going to happen. And even though they knew, they probably don't feel it because they haven't experienced it before. Okay? So raising the awareness is quite important. Okay, so by asking this kind of question, what will be some of the major negative consequences of nicotine addiction? You are raising the awareness. You're making people think far ahead into the future about what will happen if this problem is not, if no action is taken to address this issue. Okay. And what else should we brainstorm about? We could brainstorm about something that we want to make sure that our reader and you are on the same page. Clarification. Okay. So clarification, what is it about? It's about making sure that we have the same definition for all the key variables that are in the argument. So what are those key variables? Those key variables are advertising of cigarettes, high level of nicotine addiction, banning cigarette advertising, and lower level of addiction. Now, you probably wonder, why is it that someone might not be on the same page as you? This seems pretty straightforward, seems pretty clear. Well, believe it or not, Thailand doesn't have any advertising of cigarette. In fact, cigarette has been banned from advertising. It's prohibited. You'll be persecuted if you advertise cigarettes. Right. So some of my students actually believe that all the images that they see on the cigarette package are advertisement of cigarette. Well, they are not. Right? When you go to convenience store like 7-Eleven and buy a pack of cigarettes, on the package you will see scary images. Like a person with his throat popped out with holes in it. People have to breathe through a tube that is inserted to the throat because they cannot breathe through the nose properly. Mouth cancer, picture of mouth cancer, scary images. Those are not there to promote sales, right? Those images are not part of the advertisements. I mean, the cigarettes company. If you were the owner of a cigarettes company, you wouldn't want those pictures to be on your product's package, right? Right, because it will deter your potential customers. It will scare them away. So those are not good marketing ideas. Okay, but those pictures are there because of the government, because of the government, anti-tobacco policy. Because the Thai government is a little bit hypocritical. So they are actually anti-tobacco, but still they making a lot of money from fintechs, from sales of tobacco products. So so they have to allow this to happen, but at the same time have to say that this is bad. So that's hypocritical. But anyway, so as far as clarification is concerned, you might want to explain to your readers what is and what is not advertising of cigarette. Okay, maybe you can give example of cigarette advertisement. What is a cigarette advertisement? All right, so that people who think that all those scary images on cigarette packaging and not advertisement. Okay, so clarification. What is and what is not a form of cigarette? What is and what is not a form of cigarette advertising? Okay. Okay, what else should you clarify? Okay. Now, if you go back to the statement here, there's not a single word that says cigarettes, right? We only see the word nicotine addiction. Well, not until the very last sentence do we see the word cigarettes. So maybe there might be other products that contain nicotine. We don't know, right? But we are more concerned about nicotine in cigarettes. Okay, so you probably want to explain to your audience or to your readers that, well, nicotine could be found in many products, but we are most concerned about nicotine that are found in cigarettes. So that's one thing you might want to clarify. Another thing that you might want to clarify is what exactly is nicotine? Because you might know what nicotine is, but some of your audience may not know what nicotine is. So as far as clarification is concerned, you might want to explain. I'm just going to use WH here. So what is nicotine? And where can it be found? Okay. So these are all the questions that you have to answer. Okay. So we still have 8 minutes left. Well, let's try to answer some of these questions. Okay. So next time when we talk about outlining, we'll be able to use some of our brainstorm ideas to create an outline. Okay, so back to the very first question. How do you think an uncensored advertising of cigarette cause high level of cigarette addiction? How? Do you guys have any idea? Yeah. Why do you think people start smoking just by seeing some cigarette advertisement on, I don't know, social media or on their television? Okay. Now, when you have to answer questions that begin with how or questions that begin with why, you actually have to go back, right? You have to go back, you have to backtrack. Yeah? So, for example, in this case here, someone is addicted to cigarettes, right? We call it cigarette addiction. Okay. And then we ask, how does cigarette advertising lead to that? So we are thinking that cigarette advertising is almost at the far left, or it's at the beginning, right? Cigarette ads is here, and it must lead to something, which leads to some other thing, which leads to some other thing before it leads to cigarette addiction. So the more you can fill this gap, right? The more detailed your explanation will be. Okay? So can you fill the gap? What does cigarette advertising lead to? Which leads to what? Which leads to what before it leads to cigarette addiction? Well, let me help you out because I can think of one. So I think cigarettes advertising, right? Cigarette advertising. It first leads to what? Curiosity. Yeah. First time you see it, if you're not paying attention, that's okay. The second time you see it, you start thinking about, why is it so cool? Why do people smoke? What does it feel like when you smoke? Right? So many questions now, right? You're curious. You're wanting to know. And that curiosity will just put more and more pressure on you, right? To try just one piece of cigarettes, just to see what it feels like, just to answer all the questions that you have. So cigarette advertising leads to curiosity, and curiosity will lead to an attempt, right? Or to an experiment. You try it. Okay. And if you have to try so many times, repeated experiment or repeated smoking, eventually you become addicted to it. Okay. So curiosity, right? Why is cigarette advertising? Sorry. How could uncensored advertising of cigarette cause high level of cigarette addiction? Well, it arouses young people curiosity. All right. Next question. How can the level of cigarette addiction among young people be reduced? Just by banning cigarette advertising. Now, if you assume that although 70% of young smokers smoke because they have been aroused by exposure to cigarette advertising, then this question is very easy to answer, right? Because by banning, you reduce their exposure, right? By banning the exposure to smoking can be reduced, right? By banning, the exposure to smoking can be reduced. And when that exposure is reduced, the curiosity will be kept at bay, right? It will not go higher. It can be reduced, okay? Now, what are the inherent benefits of banning advertising of cigarettes? So the inherent benefits, like I said, is just something else that can be as good as what you expect, but probably have nothing to do with what you expect. You know, like I give you an example of recycling, of building a BTS, for example, building another station. Well, your goal is probably to reduce traffic, right? Or to provide more access for people who want to use the public transport. But whenever there is a SkyTrain station, it will generate what? It will create jobs, right? It will create jobs, and it will improve the economy in that area. Right. Okay, so you will see more shopping centers being built, more residential areas being built, and that would create jobs, opportunities for people. So it also improves the economy in that sense. Okay. Okay, so banning cigarette advertising, what other benefits can it bring? Well, if you ban cigarette advertising, so you sort of create more space for advertising of other more healthy products, right? I think. Okay, so the benefits of banning advertising of cigarette is that um, it will give more room for advertising healthier products. Okay. All right. So this is basically how to generate ideas. Okay. So to generate ideas, you need to ask a lot of questions. Okay. So far you see that, okay, I have only 3 questions. Okay. And based on these 3 questions, I generate 3 ideas, which are written in green. Okay. Now, if my answer is not clear to you, you can continue to ask questions. All right. Like when I say it arouses young people curiosity, like this first answer, it arouses young people curiosity. You might want to further ask question, how does it arouse people curiosity just by seeing advertising? You can do that, okay? And if you can find answer to it, that's cool. That means when you write about um, that's mean when you write a paragraph about it will be clear because you have in a way anticipate, right? You have anticipated what your readers want to know. Okay? But if you can't answer, that's fine. That means you hit the button. That means it's already clear. It can't be developed any further. Okay? So I'm gonna leave it where it is. Okay? And we will continue answering the rest of the questions next time. Do you guys have any questions? Any things you want me to talk more about? Are we good? All right. Okay, if you don't have any further questions, then I guess I will call it a day. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for attention. Goodbye.